Last week, we started testing EDC Scissors, and the Klein electrician shears absolutely dominated that competition. But it created some questions. How would the multi-tool scissors do at the exact same gauntlet? So in this video, we're going to test 8 different multi-tools, 8 different scissors. And I hate to say it, but you're going to be incredibly surprised at the results. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Now for reference, these are the 11 items that we'll be using to test the various different types of scissors. I go into this much more in depth in the last video, and I will put the playlist to all of these scissor testing videos down in the description. Now first up is the Victorinox 85mm. Now this has a different style of scissor than the 91mm. It is fully serrated and it has an integrated spring bar that actually works a little bit differently than the one that is used in 91mm. Now, I'm very curious to see how this performs relative to the testing that we did last week, where the 91mm got a 15 plus, which is a really, really good baseline. Now, this style of pocket knife made by Vic has a couple unique features, such as a locking blade and a pressure locked flathead, but yeah, it's a completely different type of scissors, so it's worth testing for sure. Now let's go ahead and explain the scoring. You can get 1 point if it can simply cut the material, and 2 points if it can cut it cleanly or cut it up close to the tip, maybe about 1/8 of an inch from the tip. Also, it can get 0 points if you either have to force the material through it, it doesn't cut the material at all cleanly, or it deforms the scissor. The other thing you'll notice is that I'm holding material with just 2 fingers and never stretching or putting any tension on the material. That's very, very important. Now you're not going to have to keep track of the points. I'm going to sum it up at the end of each section. I'm also going to put the entire thing together at the end of the video in a conclusion. On top of this, we will also be including a spreadsheet down in the description that is going to span all of the scissor testing and give you a breakdown based on weight, based on cost, and many other factors as well. So if you are into that kind of data, that's going to be available as well. Now, one of the reasons I do tests like this is so that I have some form of raw data. I think either the Kevlar or the seatbelt could have been a 1 point, potentially, depending on how you judge it. So what I'm going to do is split the difference and give it a total of 1 point.
Total fail. Total fail.
Now I do this in part so that you can make your own assessment, but I'm going to give this an 11. I think it could be a little bit on either side, either a 10 or a 12, but I think 11 is a pretty good number for this exact scissor.
Total fail.
Now next up is the Leatherman Curl. Now this is representing an entire series of scissors that are present in the Charge, the Wave, and many others, including past generations like the Blast and the Kick and so on. This is a brand new scissor, so it's going to be really indicative of how it will perform. Now this scissor got off to a really good start of 7, and then, well, you'll see.
Total fail. Total fail. Total fail. Total fail. Total fail.
Now, the one surprise I did have here was I thought it would at least be able to do the precision task, but it turns out it can't even do that, unfortunately. It may vary a little bit from scissor to scissor, but 7 for this.
Total fail.
Now the next scissor we have up is part of a whole series of different multi-tools. They're all budget related. You can find them usually under $30, and they all have very similar or basically the same scissor. So there's a whole different group of models that have this scissor, and I wanted to demonstrate just how good the geometry is. Now, I have been really successful with using this in the past, and I was really kind of blown away with how good they cut, but there's no telling how they will actually perform on the gauntlet. So I figured we'd give it a shot in this video.
Total fail.
When I said the scissor was impressive, I was not kidding. 16. Now the question is going to be, are something like the Surge scissors going to actually beat it? Now, although the Wingman price has gone up a lot, it's still a very, very popular multi-tool, and it is loved by a lot of people. So I wanted to showcase how the scissors perform relative to everything else. These are not really my favorite, but I was lucky enough to have a pair that have not really received any use on the scissors. So this is going to be very true to what a Wingman scissor will be right out of the box. Now you'll notice something with this scissor that I have not seen anywhere else. All the material just slides right out. And as long as I'm not putting tension on it, it is incredibly difficult to cut materials with this scissor. There's just nothing to bite, no texturing. It's almost like they polished the blades for some reason. And it shows. And this is the same thing with every Wingman scissor that I've ever used. Now, it may appear that I'm being a little unfair by not holding the material on both sides. The truth is, though, what makes a scissor so useful is the fact that you do not have to have something rigid in which to press the blade up against. That's why you would want a scissor over a knife, potentially. So it's important that I am equal in treatment of the scissors in this case. And you're going to see, without tension, without holding the material on both sides, the performance of the Wingman is, let's just say it's not good. It's not good.
Total fail. Total fail.
I find this test very interesting at this point because the rubber is not slipping out, being that it's rubber. So I wonder if I were to sharpen it with a rough grit, in other words, making it have micro serrations, would it grip well enough and potentially cut better? I think that's worthy of a video in the future, for sure.
Total fail.
Man, I cannot wait to see the comments after this section of the video. So, with a score of 4+, not looking good for the Wingman. Now, next up, we have the Leatherman Surge. This is the ultra heavy duty Leatherman of choice. And one of its claim to fame is a very robust scissor. Now, generally speaking, I've always been very impressed with this scissor, so I have high hopes of the results in this gauntless test. This particular Surge has not been in my collection for all that long, so it should do very, very well. Well, I guess we'll see though. Now, it's kind of at this point that I should have realized there's something weird going on with this scissor. I cannot put my finger on it exactly, but it appears that the tip's more flexible than I remember the Leatherman Surge being. And I have never had a problem cutting paracord, even the Titan Survivor cord, in the past. So this is a new scissor, and I didn't manipulate in any way, but we may have to do additional testing with the Surge. Yes, something is definitely up with these scissors. Now, I didn't expect it to be able to do the precision test, but I definitely thought it would do better, at least on the paracord. I'm not sure what's going on.
Total fail.
Now, the Leatherman Raptor definitely was one of the most requested of all the scissors from last week's video, and thankfully I have one. And I have always really liked it, especially the fact that the original variant comes with an incredible holster as well, if you've never gotten a chance to see that, which works both closed when it's folded up and also when it's open and it locks in place. Very cool. And it even rotates so that you can set the scissor horizontally if you want to. Now, this is the part that really surprised me. I would have expected it to perform much better on these two pieces of material, especially the pallet strap or the tie-down strap. It really didn't want to go through it. It kept getting in between the blades, and I cannot give it 1 point as much as I'd like to. Next up is the Ruike 5-layer pocket knife. So this thing is a beast. It is much bigger than you might expect. And the scissors are no exception. So this particular pair really impressed me when I unboxed it. And even more so, the fact that the blade stays stationary when you close it really is quite helpful when you're using the scissor. A lot of times when you have those integrated springs, that's not the case, like in the Victorinox 85mm, which moves every time you press it down. This also has a 12C27 blade, so really high quality and something I've been very curious about.
Total fail.
Other than this kind of locking up, it definitely cut it, so it does get 1 point. This is why we review it and check it and make sure that we're correct.
Total fail.
Overall, I mean, this is pretty decent performance and certainly better than some of the other multi-tools we've already tested. So a 13 is very respectable. I'm pretty darn happy with it. Do I wish it had a precision tip? Of course, but 13, I'll take it. Now the last one we have to review is the Leatherman Free Series scissor. So we're going to use the one that is on my free P2, and I have carried this actually surprising amount. It's a very convenient size, and as far as a compact version, I actually kind of like the P2 a little bit better than the P4, funny enough, but I've modified it. You can see I have changed the Phillips to accept the rebar bit holder, which dramatically improves its functionality, but other than that, it's the same tool. Now it's close on this. It could almost be a 1, but there's something up with the geometry and how the seatbelt cuts. It's not comfortable, it's not easy. You'd be better off with a knife. So I'm definitely sticking with the 0 on this one.
Total fail.
Now, if you're wondering why I don't bother with this, is it's a strictly harder version of the seatbelt. So if it's not going to cut the seatbelt, it isn't going to cut that either. You know, surprisingly, this scissor did well, especially if you compare it to the Leatherman Wave scissor, which only got a 7 in this test. So I'll take it. Definitely not what I expected to happen, and I'm pretty sure you thought it would go a different way as well. Based on what you saw, would you have assigned points differently? Let me know down in the comments. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. And just for the record, here is what we had last week with the dedicated scissors. Quite interesting. Wow, okay, so not exactly the results I was expecting. Funny enough though, the Wingman did perform exactly as I thought it would. I have never had good experience with this, and the fact is there's something weird going on with the finish on the edge. Everything slides right out of the jaws, and if you're not putting tension on it, the likelihood of it cutting something is pretty low. The Wave scissor basically did what I expected, and that's perfectly fine. But although I did hope that it would still work as a precision tipped instrument, but it didn't seem to want to cut the small thread. The Free Series scissor actually performed better than I expected. I thought it was going to be closer to the Wave scissor. Turns out it wasn't. The Surge definitely underperformed. I've never had problems cutting paracord in the past. I would have at least gotten an extra point there. I definitely think there's something weird with this particular one that I have. Maybe a weird heat treatment, because there's just too much flex in the blade, and I don't think I ever remember experiencing that before. The Victorinox performed as what I expected, about a little bit worse than the standard 91mm, but it would still cut some things differently because of those serrations. So some areas where the 91mm suffered a little bit, this actually performed better. The Raptor definitely was thinking it would perform better, and maybe that's because it comes a little bit loose on the pivot from the factory, and I could tune it up, but it's hard to say that that would improve it, because at the tip it still has pretty good contact and kind of pulls itself together. Maybe that's kind of the way it's supposed to be. The Ruike definitely performed well at 13. I'm definitely happy with it. I did not hear as many good things about the smaller variants of this scissor from its brand, but this one seems to perform really good. And then of course the Fantasticar scissor absolutely destroyed in this particular competition. I don't think the steel quality is as good, nearly as good as the rest. However, for $25 to $30, this is a pretty good tool. So I think only time will tell. I think that certainly this would be the first one to fail from a quality perspective, but from a geometry cutting, it's phenomenal. I'm curious though, what should I do next? I'm thinking at least the Micra, but what else? You let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I will see you again next week.